"You're not on the list, sir. And that patch looks like it was sewn by a child." The young soldier barely glanced up from his clipboard. His tone was sharp, mechanical, like he'd said it 100 times already that morning. Elias Rowe didn't flinch. He simply stood there, hat in hand, the breeze catching the edge of his coat. He wore his old uniform, worn, pressed, and faded with time. On the right shoulder, stitched with uneven thread, was a small patch. Margaret, the name his wife had embroidered herself just weeks before cancer took her. It was the only thing he ever let touch that sleeve. One of the younger officers smirked. "Sir, this is a closed ceremony, military funeral. You need clearance to step inside." Elias said nothing. He simply adjusted the patch with one hand, the other a prosthetic, and stepped away from the gate. He stood just beyond the entrance, back straight, boots together, eyes fixed on the folded flags waving beyond the iron bars. He wasn't here to disrupt. He was here to say goodbye. If you believe no one should be treated this way, type the word honor below. Your voice matters more than you think. Elias stayed where he was, just outside the black row iron gate. The sun climbed slowly behind him, casting long shadows across the gravel. His posture didn't falter, even with the ache in his leg. Even as people in dress blues walked past him without a glance, a few guests showed their credentials and were waved through. One or two glanced his way, a flicker of confusion, maybe pity, but no one stopped. A man with a camera adjusted his lens and turned deliberately in another direction. Inside, rows of white chairs filled quickly. Flags lined the central path leading to the ceremonial canopy. A marine color guard rehearsed their movements in silence. Elias looked down at the badge clipped to his chest. It wasn't new. It wasn't digital. Just a faded plastic rectangle with a photograph taken 20 years ago, laminated and cracked. His name, his unit, his discharge status. He offered it again to the same guard. The young man didn't even touch it. "Sir, that's not valid anymore. You're not on the list." "I came to honor a friend," Elias said softly. "Name of the deceased: General Patrick Whitmore." The guard tapped at a tablet. "Do you have family relation?" "Well, I served with him 34 years ago." The guard looked up again, this time with a mix of discomfort and indifference. "Sorry, sir. Without formal clearance, we can't make exceptions." Elias nodded once. "Understand." He stepped back again and waited. A gust of wind swept across the grounds, rattling the flags. The edge of his coat lifted, revealing the dull sheen of the mechanical joint on his leg. He pressed the fabric down gently. One of the officers near the gate leaned toward a colleague and whispered something under his breath. The other laughed quietly. Elias heard it. He didn't turn. Instead, he looked through the bars again, through the crowd already assembling toward the stage. He had been there before, not for this general, but for the others, the ones whose names didn't make the papers, the ones who didn't get four-star funerals, just folded flags and half-empty rows. He wasn't here for ceremony. He was here because he remembered, and because somewhere inside that perfect white canopy was the man who once bled beside him on a dirt road in Basra. The man who had whispered, "Don't let them bury me alone." Elias had kept that promise for 34 years. A group of younger soldiers passed by laughing and tossing around an energy drink. One of them noticed Elias standing there and paused. "Hey, who let Grandpa out of the museum?" The others chuckled. The one who spoke looked closer and pointed at the patch on Elias's shoulder. "What is that? A tribute or something?" Elias didn't answer. He raised one hand to adjust his collar, then folded both hands behind his back, left flesh, right metal, and stared forward still like a statue too dignified to dust off. The sun was higher now, casting sharp shadows through the black bars. Inside, the service had begun. Elias could hear the first notes of the national anthem faintly in the wind, the kind of distant echo that makes you straighten your spine, whether anyone's watching or not. He didn't move. Not when the honor guard presented arms. Not when the first rifle volley cracked the morning silence. And not when the boys returned. The same group of young soldiers wandered back toward the front, restless, unsupervised, trading glances with one another. One of them carried a program from the ceremony, glossy, folded neatly. Another snapped photos on his phone, casual, smirking. They slowed when they saw Elias still standing there, still waiting, still silent. "Man," one of them muttered. "He hasn't moved. That's dedication or dementia." The others laughed. The tallest among them, early 20s maybe, stepped a little closer. His boots scraped the gravel. He pointed at the patch again. "Margaret, was she your wife?" Elias didn't respond. "She make that for you?" he asked, leaning in. "Looks like it came from a pillowcase." Another round of soft laughter. Not cruel but careless. That made it worse. The soldier reached out, 2 fingers only, and tapped the patch like it was a joke badge at a costume party. The fabric twitched. Elias's hand rose instinctively. Not fast, not defensive, just enough to cover the name with his palm. Then he looked the young man in the eyes. Not angry, not sad, just steady. The soldier's smirk faded. He stepped back. No one said a word. No one intervened. A nearby officer glanced over, saw everything, and turned back to his clipboard. Across the field, the ceremony continued. A folded flag was being passed from one officer to another. Words were spoken into microphones. Cameras clicked. Dignitaries nodded. Elias remained at the gate, unacknowledged, uninvited. A moment later, the group drifted away. One of them muttered something under his breath. Another snorted. Elias sat down slowly on a low stone ledge near the wall, his legs stiff from standing. He placed his hat beside him on the bench. The prosthetic made a quiet metallic sound as it touched the concrete. He exhaled a long, tired breath, and then reached up to the patch on his shoulder. He unclipped it with care. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed it flat in his lap, pressing out the creases like it was something sacred, because it was. The thread was uneven, the letters slightly crooked, but every stitch had been done by her hand, every letter sewn with a hope he hadn't understood until she was gone. He stared at it, then folded it once, twice, and placed it gently against his chest. No cameras caught that moment. No one applauded. No one even noticed except one man. A captain standing quietly near the gate had been watching the entire time. His uniform was crisp, bronze star pinned on the chest. He didn't speak, didn't approach. He turned and walked toward the command tent. Elias remained seated, not slumped, not defeated, just still. The folded patch rested in his front pocket now, close to his chest. He kept a hand over it, flesh, not metal, as if holding something alive. The sounds of the ceremony floated faintly from across the field. Muffled eulogies, ceremonial commands, the sharp echo of boots turning in synchronized formation. But out here, outside the gates, there was only wind and memory. Elias shifted slightly on the stone ledge. His leg throbbed. He didn't show it. Instead, he reached down and straightened the crease on his pant leg. He wiped a bit of dust from his prosthetic. Then he picked up his cap and placed it carefully on his head, and he stood slowly, deliberately back to attention. No one told him to. No one was watching. But he stood as if someone was, as if Margaret might be, as if Patrick Whitmore, the man lying in the polished casket 100 feet away, could still see the brother who once pulled him out of a burning Humvee under sniper fire in the outskirts of Basra. He remembered the way Patrick's voice had cracked that night. Not from pain but from disbelief. "You shouldn't have come back for me." "I didn't," Elias had whispered. "She told me not to leave anyone behind." He never said her name, but Patrick always knew. Elias turned now, facing the flag-draped canopy in the distance. His eyes didn't squint. They stared wide and clear. The breeze caught the hem of his coat again. This time he let it flow, and then with no audience, no music, no order given, he saluted. It wasn't a crisp textbook motion. His right side was metal. The arm moved stiffly, slowly, a shadow of its former precision. But the meaning was perfect. A salute not to a general, but to a friend, to a promise kept, to a memory never surrendered. At that exact moment across the field, the captain who had watched from afar stepped into the command tent. His boots were clean, his posture upright, but his voice was low when he spoke to the man at the center of the room. "Sir," he said, careful not to interrupt, "there's someone outside. I think you'll want to see him." The man standing at the front of the tent turned. His hair was mostly gray now, cropped close. Metals lined the left breast of his formal jacket, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, softened as the captain spoke one name, Elias Rowe. There was a pause, then a breath, and then the general nodded. Not like an officer giving a command, but like a man remembering something he'd been carrying for decades. General Christopher Doyle didn't wait for the protocol officer to announce his movement. He handed his ceremonial binder to an aide, removed his white gloves, and stepped out of the tent with quiet urgency. The honor guard paused. So did the speakers. Unsure what was happening, Doyle crossed the main aisle, not toward the podium, not toward the family seats, but away from the core of the ceremony, straight across the grass, toward the edge of the gate, toward Elias Rowe. The crowd turned, whispering. Some stood, cameras adjusted. No one understood why the highest-ranking officer in the field was abandoning his post in the middle of a military state funeral, until they saw what he did next. Doyle stopped just inches from Elias. He didn't salute immediately. He looked first fully deeply at the man before him, the man with a prosthetic leg, the man whose uniform was pressed but outdated, the man who had stood without permission, without clearance for over an hour. Then, without a word, Doyle extended his hand, not in command, not in show, but in reverence. "I heard you wouldn't come," he said quietly. "But he made me promise. If you showed up, it had to be you." Elias blinked, the wind brushing across his face. "Had to be me for what?" Doyle turned slightly and gestured behind him. An aide stepped forward, holding a polished wooden box. The urn, the remains of General Patrick Whitmore. Elias's breath caught. He wrote it into his final directive. Doyle said only one man could carry him to rest. Elias's voice was thin, cracked. "I thought they'd forgotten." Doyle shook his head, eyes glinting. "No, Sergeant, you're the reason he made it to 30, the reason he became the man we're burying today." He paused, then leaned in closer. "And I'm the reason he lived to meet his granddaughter." Elias looked down at the box. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached out. Doyle placed the urn in his hands with care. It was heavier than Elias expected. He looked up behind them. The entire assembly was now on their feet. No one spoke. No one moved. And when Elias turned toward the central path, Doyle moved beside him. Not in front, not behind, but shoulder to shoulder. Together, they walked through the gate, across the field, toward the altar. The military band didn't play. The press didn't shout. The only sound was the hush of shifting uniforms and the quiet steps of reverence as soldiers, young and old, stood at attention on either side of the procession. Some saluted, some simply placed hands over their hearts. Elias carried the urn like he had carried his oath, not for recognition, but because it was right. Doyle leaned slightly and said just above a whisper, "I was there, Elias Basra. I was the second radio operator. You pulled me out too." Elias didn't answer. He just walked. And in that moment, the silence became sacred. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, even in silence, subscribe now. It's how we remember what must never be forgotten. The final stretch of grass looked longer than it was. Elias walked one step at a time, the urn steady in his arms. The breeze softened. The sun pressed gently through the clouds above, bathing the field in muted light. He didn't hear the whispers anymore. Didn't notice the cameras, the rows of dignitaries, the brass insignias catching sunlight like metals of silence. All he saw was the casket platform up ahead, the folded flag waiting for its final weight. And beside him, General Doyle walked in silence, matching pace. Halfway through the procession, Elias noticed them. The same young soldiers who had laughed earlier, now standing at rigid attention, not ordered, not forced. each of them with their heads lifted, eyes forward, and as Elias passed, one of them, the one who had touched the patch, stepped out just slightly and whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry." Elias didn't stop, but he nodded. And in that moment, the apology carried more weight than the insult ever had. They reached the platform. Elias stepped up, placed the urn on the marble pedestal above the folded flag, and removed his cap. He rested his palm over the urn, then stepped back. No applause, no anthem, just stillness. And then a rustle among the ranks. Veterans in civilian clothes, scattered throughout the crowd, stood slowly. Some raised hands in salute. Others removed their hats. One man clutched his cane and stood without support, legs shaking. A woman in a dress uniform, silver hair tucked under her beret, stood tall and whispered, "Welcome home." Elias blinked. Not because of the wind, but because he hadn't expected it. Not this, not ever. The ceremony concluded. A rifle salute cracked across the air. Taps rang out clear and slow, each note sinking deep into the bones of every listener. When it ended, General Doyle turned toward Elias. "I know you didn't want recognition," he said quietly. Elias glanced down. "It was never about being seen." "I know," Doyle replied. "But some things deserve to be remembered." 1 hour later, as the last chairs were folded and the guests dispersed, a small group remained near the far side of the cemetery. They gathered around a simple bronze plaque newly placed at the base of an oak tree planted years ago. It read in honor of Staff Sergeant Elias Rowe and Margaret Rowe. Because honor is not given, it's carried. No statue, no podium, just truth. Elias didn't speak. He stood beside the tree, fingers brushing the bark. Then from his coat pocket, he pulled out the patch one last time. He bent down and buried it beneath the soil at the base of the tree. A gesture no one told him to make, but one that said more than words ever could. Doyle stepped up beside him. "They'll come here," Elias said. Doyle nodded. "They already are." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.